a special guest here, Austin Mitchell. Austin, how are you doing today?
Pretty good. I have some dev boards that came up today, so I'm happy.
That's great. We're going to be covering a topic that it's a new topic for us here on the podcast, but it's something that it's part of what the mission of this podcast is, which is to build community through information and knowledge expansion, right? And so far, when you look back at the various episodes of this podcast, you see, we bring different people from different facets of life, whether it's medicine, technology, to talk about how they made it to where they are, but also to talk about how people can get involved in doing things with the community. This one is a little bit different because we're going to do something quite interesting here. We're going to talk about advocacy, right? We're going to talk about makerspaces, right, and technical creativity. But before we do that, why don't you give us a little bit of background on you and how did you come to be doing this that you're doing right now?
Well, I think it was kind of a long time coming, at least doing all of this, just because ever since I was probably 5 or 6, I've been always, taking things apart or putting things together and building contraptions and random things that definitely didn't work back then. But it was about the mindset, right? And, growing up interested in this kind of area, throughout my high school career and everything, trying to understand what this would look like as an actual career, right? Because at least when I was growing up, computer engineering, programming was definitely a thing, but it was less on people's radar, at least in the schools that I was coming up in, right? So yeah, as we're growing up, I'm trying to understand, can I do robotics? Can I do, just software on computers and learning different programming languages and things. And it wasn't until the end of my high school career when I understood, there are these things called makers. And what is a maker, right? It's a person. It's somebody who actually takes ideas and makes them into a real product, right? I wanted to be an inventor, that kind of thing. But I hadn't seen it happen in front of me until the end of my high school career. And then that was all I could focus on in college. I went to Georgia Tech and I did computer engineering because everything that you want to make nowadays, they all have computers in them, right? If they're big or small. So I did computer engineering, not for the goal of doing computer engineering at its base, but because I wanted to be able to make and understand everything out there in the world. I wanted to look at a product and go, I know how that works, and be able to make something similar or make something that can solve my needs, right? So that's kind of where everything started anyways.
So let's talk about that concept of maker and maker spaces. That was actually, to me, it was a new concept until we started talking about it. It kind of makes sense, but why don't you talk to the audience a little bit about what is that concept and why should they care?
Yeah, so the term makerspace kind of explains itself, right? But there's a lot more to it than you would think on the surface anyways. So a makerspace, think of it like a gym, right? You go somewhere, you pay a subscription or membership to be able to get into a place, right? And it has all these different machines, but instead of exercising your body, you're exercising your brain or your creativity to build products or solve problems in your life, right? Or just join a community of people who can help you understand more of what there is out there. So using machines like 3D printers, understanding how CAD and 3D design works, laser cutting, CNC, all sorts of different, really, they're called rapid prototyping tools that you can use to create products, right? And one aspect of it that I think, in my opinion, is the harder thing to tackle is the software aspect and actually understanding the electronics and how to build something from the computer side of things. So that's what we're focused on here and why we have all these fun props. But makerspaces are much more than just computers. There's woodworking, painting, there's embroidery, right? All sorts of things.
So that's interesting. So You see, I'm learning something new. It was my impression that it was, kind of focused on the electronics, but it goes beyond electronics. You can have maker spaces for all kinds of other manual type of work.
Exactly. It really puts the A in STEAM, right? A lot of people, it used to be STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, math. But this is where the A in art kind of intersects it, right? Because you build something and it looks like this and it's just a big unwieldy block, right? But you have to integrate the user interface and the user experience with the design of whatever you're building. And it does kind of push you into this art form category that I'm really interested in. And I didn't think I would really be into art when I was growing up. I didn't really like art class. But the more you build out a product or something that is solving a need that you have, the more you go, oh, this would look cool if I did this to it, right? Or if I smoothed this out and rounded it, and then it kind of just takes its own shape while you're building it.
So in the world of building electronics and building things that makers want to build that look like this, what are some of the tools that are available today? Because I'm listening to you speak, and I remember when I went to engineering school, which was a long time ago, right? And there was computer engineering, there was electrical engineering, all these different projects, but there wasn't the availability that we have today to so quickly, almost overnight, get a circuit board designed and shipped back to you so that you can build something, right? There were certainly no 3D printers available when I was in college. What are some of the tools that a makerspace has to have available in order for it to be called a makerspace?
So there's lots of different makerspaces out there themed after different things, right? There's mechanical engineering makerspaces, there's aerospace engineering makerspaces, there's computer engineering, electrical engineering spaces, right? And they all have different subsets of tools. But the one tool that kind of brings them all together is community, right? Now, I'll answer your actual question here, which is the spaces that I've helped start. You need 3D printers. You need laser cutting. Well, I love laser cutting, so you need it. Woodworking is pretty good, depending on the cleanliness level, because it can get really sawdusty, right? If you can kind of keep it in its own area that you can clean. Woodworking is a really important one. And then from the electronic side, you need scopes, right? Oscilloscopes for measuring your circuits and everything. You need multimeters. You need power supplies, logic analyzers, right? All of these different parts to actually trace and understand the design of what you made and know if it's working or not, right? You can put as many blinky lights as you want, but as soon as one of them doesn't do what you think it's going to do, you have to actually get in here and start scoping it out.
Right. Okay, so community. Let's talk about community for a moment, because it seems like there is an element there of something that, as you know, is dear to my heart, of building community and having people participate in these types of things. These places have to be funded somehow. So I'm assuming then that there is an element of donations, there's an element of memberships, there's various moving parts that actually make the whole thing work.
Yep.
And if those moving parts are homegrown from the community where this place is, then even better, right?
Yeah. So there's a couple different models that you can use to kind of grow and sustain a makerspace, and it comes from the origin of the space itself, right? So at Georgia Tech, I was one of the founding members of the Hive, right? The Interdisciplinary Design Commons was the name of the building. And so that was funded mainly from donors and school funds, right? Students didn't have to pay anything for it. It was a resource for anyone who walked in the door. And we were really glad that we could do that, because the minute somebody walked in the door who had never been there before, right? No idea how any of the tools work. That's where community comes in, right? We have people working around the clock who are there just to manage and run the front desk to check people in, but then we have people at every single station around to be able to provide support and help for each person if they don't know how to use a tool, or if they come in and they're doing we had so many students that came in doing architecture projects, and they're doing they're cutting these foam boards out and you stack them all up, right? They love to use the laser cutter to do this and automate their whole process. They've never touched a laser cutter before in their life, right? So we have people right there who can talk to them and guide them through the whole process. So that's a huge resource for students, right? The second makerspace that I helped open was actually a private commercial space for internal research and development with L3 Harris, right? That space was funded internally by the company because they wanted to offer it as a resource for employees to be able to work on their own projects, right? But program projects and internal research for the company for profit-seeking ventures was prioritized, right? And that's why they were available to fund it that way, right? This one here in Lake Nona that we're opening here in MS2, we're looking at a bunch of different options for bringing in funding, right? There's ways you can do it if you have educational elements to do government grants, right? Memberships are kind of a common staple, right? Running it as a nonprofit and using memberships to kind of fund everything, be able to pay to repair the machines, pay for filament, other things like that. So those are kind of the three main avenues for funding and running a makerspace.
So immediately it comes to mind, and I do want to talk about this, but I want to talk about something else first. The model of helping a student comes right to mind, right? Whether a student is a high school student or a university student, and obviously they're going to have science projects, and different types of things. And what a great place for a young mind to be able to come in and interact with adults, have all these tools available to them, and be able to build their projects. However, there's another element to it, which can be a professional element, more of someone who has an idea, someone, who's an adult, a parent, even a grandparent. They're sitting at home, they have an idea, and they really want to give it a shot and make it into at least a prototype just to see, will it do what I think it needs to do, or will it be useful once it's built? And this actually serves that purpose as well, as a hobby or also as a potentially commercial product. You want to expand on that?
Well, I mean, you can learn at any age, right? I've taught people how to use lathes who are, 50, 60 years old, back at like the L3 Harris space. CNC, same deal, right? Any of these tools that you don't know how to learn, you can learn at any age. It's great when you're young because you're interested in all of these things. You don't know anything. You come in with a clean slate, right? But I mean, really, you can learn at any age, and that's what I think is so great about this. And the cool thing is, you can show up to a space and have a project or an idea that you want to do, but have no idea how to actually execute it, right? And this is where that element of community kind of comes in. And there's this guy, his name's Tony Hsieh. He's the CEO of Zappos. I think he retired in 22. Who coined this term collisionable, right, or collisionability, I guess in this case, where makerspaces provide a area, right, where people come together, an intersection of people with experience from all sorts of ages, right, all sorts of experience levels, different machines, different areas of business, right, and places in their career. And a makerspace essentially throws them all together in one place. So if somebody comes in and they have an idea, but they don't know how to do it, right? You're rubbing shoulders with people who have been in this kind of area or career path or life path or hobby for so long, they can easily go, oh, hey, this is how you should do this, right? Or, I'm doing a power design, trying to get battery charger to work on a new product or project I'm doing. I've never done this before. Why isn't this working? Or what's a good approach? What are some parts that I should use for a project? And somebody who's an expert or knows a thing or two can just be right there to say, oh, hey, look up this, watch these videos, go do this research, come back and we'll do it together, right? Or if you have 5 minutes, can you show me how to use this scope? Just stuff like that.
Is there an element of collaboration in addition to that? But what I mean by that is I'm just use myself as an example. I'm an electrical engineer, but everyone who knows me knows that I always hated circuit board design. I always hated it. It was my worst class. I was more of a systems, guy. Could I do circuit board design? Great. Are there tools available that can help? Yes. But it's not something that I necessarily want to do. So does that fit in the model? It's like, hey, I have this idea. I have all these parts. I'm not really good at this element of the design. Could you help me with that part?
Yeah. So there's definitely been a lot of times where I've been in that position for sure. One of my goals when I was at Georgia Tech, they have this thing called the Ramblin' Rec Parade, right? Normally it's meant for student organizations to get together and build a project. And what a rec is it has to be a vehicle that uses non-standard transportation modes, right? So you can't just submit a car that already exists, right? You have to modify it in a way or create a whole new vehicle to be able to get down this street. And it's a big thing they do around homecoming. I'm like, oh, that's something I would really love to do before I leave, right? But where do I start, right? I was able to ethically source some e-scooters that were from a rental company. We were actually talking to the GM of the Atlanta area. He dropped off 200 scooters that were all in various states of disrepair. I'm like, I'm going to make a go-kart powered by these electric scooters, right? And this is in 2019, I think. So, how do you do that, right? First, you identify the types of motors, you break it down, you probe out the board, you understand how the motors are run, you go find controllers that can actually talk to the motor correctly, right? I didn't know I knew a few things, but I didn't know everything along this whole path to creating a working, functioning go-kart, which I did finish. I got it in time and I was in the parade and it was a great time, but it was an adventure. And so I partnered with a bunch of different students throughout the whole process, saying, hey, I have this brushless DC motor. I'm driving it with this controller that someone else recommended. How do I use this potentiometer? How do I connect it in here? And talking about, giving it a push to start because it's brushless, all sorts of stuff like that, right? And you never really understand the scope of the project until you're kind of in the weeds with it, right? And so having people who have been down that path before, they can point out every step along the way and say, hey, make sure you're paying attention to, the thermals, the temperature, right? You don't want to overheat them and then burn out a motor and then you're stuck, right? Stuff like that.
So the concept is not new, right? There are other maker spaces out here in the area. Can you expand on that a little bit and share with the folks?
Yeah, so in Orlando, there's at least 3 that are pretty popular, right? There's Makerspaces, there's Tech Center, and I think Familab. I've been out to a couple of them, and they're great spaces, right? A lot of them target different kind of aspects of makerspaces, right? So I know Makerspaces, they do a lot of like public education stuff, right? Field trips and places to have. Oh yeah. Hey, Candy. They have lots of classes that come together and they show people and get kids exposed at a younger age, right? I think even the Orlando Science Center has some maker nights and other things like that.
So what is the focus of the one that we're trying to get started here?
So in Lake Nona, we have a lot of smart people. I love a lot of people around here. Everyone has a unique perspective and a unique point of view. And here at MS2, we have a lot of startups that come through, lots of people with unique tech perspectives and new technologies, right? So I'd love to make this one themed more on the entrepreneurial side of things, where we have experts who are coming in and out, right? But also are working on their own projects in the meantime, either for fun or to maybe start a business one day. So having all this community of makers who are also CEOs, CTO, co-founders, and other people who have been through the business aspect and how to scale is really, I think, important for what we're doing and different and unique.
But you also want to help the youth.
Oh, yeah. So that's something that we're also thinking about doing, is maybe having education nights or something like that, some office hours where we can kind of open it up to the community and have either a course or some way to show and get exposure for younger people, right? Either at like the middle school or elementary school even, maybe, to understand what all these technologies look like and kind of get them exposed. Because when you know how tools work, you know how things are built, that's where the kind of creativity starts flowing, right? You don't look at a product anymore and say, oh, this does this thing. You look at a product and you understand what's happening underneath it at a bunch of different levels, right? How it was fabricated, how the software works, how the battery charging cycles work, how it interacts with your smart home network. And once you kind of understand each of these pieces, it brings all of these products that are out there that seem really big and scary and complicated, and it brings them right down to your level, to where you say, I think I could make my own one of those, right? Stuff like that.